Okay, have you ever noticed those tiny little differences between British and American English that just make you pause for a second? Well, today we are diving into a classic food fight. Is it mashed potato or mashed potatoes? And I know, it sounds simple, but this little question actually opens up a huge, fascinating story about how the very language we speak can shape the world we see.
So let's start with a quick fire round. In the UK, you'll often hear someone say they like sport as a general concept, the whole idea of it. But in the US, that sounds a little off, doesn't it? It's almost always I like sports. Just one a little S, but hang on to that, it's the beginning of a pattern.
Here's another one for you. A British kid might say they're playing with Lego, thinking of it as one big pile of plastic bricks. Meanwhile, an American kid would be talking about playing with their Legos, seeing them as all the individual pieces. See where this is going? And that brings us right back to our main event. In Britain, mashed potato is totally normal. It's treated as one big, delicious, undifferentiated lump on your plate. But in the States, it's mashed potatoes because, well, you made it from a bunch of individual potatoes. It's the exact same food, just viewed through a slightly different grammatical lens.
So what is actually going on here? Is one side right and the other wrong? Nope, not at all. This little difference actually pulls back the curtain on something really fundamental about how English works. A distinction that, believe it or not, trips up native speakers all the time.
To really get to the bottom of this, we need to talk about a core idea in linguistics, the big difference between what we call count nouns and mass nouns.
Okay, so a count noun is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a thing you can count. One chair, two chairs. One idea, many ideas. You can stick a number in front of it and it makes perfect sense. Easy enough, right?
Mass nouns, on the other hand, which are sometimes called uncountable nouns, are the opposite. They're for a substance or an idea that you can't really break into individual parts. I mean, you'd never say one water or two informations, right? You think of it as a single, whole, mass. And this isn't just a gut feeling, there's a science to it. Linguists have a whole checklist of tests to figure this out. Can you make it plural? Can you say many, or do you have to say much? These are the kinds of questions that help them sort words into these different buckets.
Now, if you're thinking, okay, this is just some nerdy academic rule, think again. This exact distinction is the root cause of one of the most public and surprisingly heated grammar arguments out there. I guarantee you've seen it.
Yep, the supermarket checkout line. The strict prescriptive rule is that you use fewer for things you can count, like items, and less for mass nouns, like water. So technically, 10 items or fewer is the correct choice. But as we're about to find out, the real history of this rule is way messier than you might think.
But here's where it gets really fun. That line between count and mass, it's not a brick wall. Some words can actually hop right over it depending on how you use them. Think about the word hair. When you talk about all the stuff on someone's head, it's a mass noun. You don't count it. But if you find one single strand of it in your soup, all of a sudden it becomes a hair, a single countable object. Kind of gross, but grammatically, it's fascinating.
And we do this all the time with drinks. Coffee is a substance, right? A mass noun. But when you're at a cafe ordering for your friends, you're asking for specific units, cups of coffee. So saying, "Can we get 3 coffees?" is perfectly normal. You've just turned a mass substance into countable items.
Okay, so we've seen how English plays this game. But is this system universal? This whole split between count stuff and mass stuff? It feels like the only logical way to categorize the world, doesn't it?
I mean, it seems so fundamental. How else would you even talk about one thing versus just a lot of stuff?
Yeah, not even close. Turns out, many languages around the world look at this in a completely different way.
So get this. Languages like Mandarin don't really have count nouns. At a base level, they treat every single noun like a mass noun, the way we treat water or information. In that system, nothing starts out as an individual countable thing.
So how do they count anything? They use something called a classifier. Think of it like a cookie cutter. You have the big, undifferentiated dough of bookness, and to get one single book, you need to use a classifier word to cut out one unit. So you can't just say one book. You have to say something that basically means one volume of book. And this is where we get to the final, absolutely mind-bending twist. Because when we look back at the history of our own language, English, we find something pretty shocking.
That's right. Old English, the language of Beowulf, did not have the strict count versus mass system we have now. In a lot of ways, it actually worked much more like a classifier language, where the line between individual things and general substances was a whole lot blurrier.
This timeline shows you how that gradual shift happened. In Old English, things were fuzzy. Then, around the 1400s, you start seeing those cookie-cutter phrases like a piece of or a loaf of become way more common. It's like people needed a new tool to carve out units from a mass. By the 1700s, our modern system was pretty much locked in.
And hey, remember that whole fewer versus less rule people get so worked up about? Well, it's a surprisingly modern invention. Back in the year 888, King Alfred the Great himself wrote the Old English equivalent of with less words, using less for something you can obviously count. The strict rule that we all got taught in school was only first suggested by some grammarian in 1770. His personal preference just happened to catch on over the next couple of centuries.
So this brings us all the way back to that humble plate of potatoes. The difference between mashed potato and mashed potatoes isn't just about what side of the Atlantic you're on. It's a story that's 1,000 years in the making. And it leaves us with one last massive question. If the grammar we use to organize the world can change so fundamentally, did the way we actually perceive the world change right along with it?